In the last video, we learned about flags and how they allow us to provide initial data to our Elm application. But if you're interoping with a React app or you're working with like Vue or Svelte, you're going to want to be able to send messages real time throughout the life of your app. So that's what ports are for. Ports allow us to define channels that can go out from Elm or into Elm and seamlessly work with JavaScript without having to worry about what if JavaScript crashes, is my Elm app going to crash, that kind of thing. So let's dive into ports and just kind of get like a basic example of how they might work. So here we have our flags from before. I'm just going to leave these as is. And I'm going to go back. We made a typo here on purpose to show that our fallback was working. And so this is us getting data using flags to pass data in initially. But you'll notice that when I initialize a program, I have access to this app variable. So I'm just going to do a console log to show you what app has. So I'm going to inspect this. And what you're going to see is there's like an unmount function, this Elm-Watch stuff. This is from the Vite plugin, but typically what you're going to look for is something called app.ports. And app.ports is not defined right now because we're not using any ports yet. So let's use our first port. In order to get started with ports, we need to just have a basic understanding of what they kind of do. So a port allows us to work with subscriptions and commands. So a port can either be ingoing or outgoing. So like maybe we want to send a string out from our app. So let's say like console log or something like that. That might be an outgoing port where we're sending a message to JavaScript, asking it to run a console log for us. There's also incoming ports. So let's say we want to listen for some timer that goes off. So we start a timer in JavaScript and we want that timer to call us in our update function and let our Elm app know, like, the timer went off. So, on timer. So we can say, give me, call me back with this message when that timer goes off. So on timer fired. Also, we got to make sure that we define our ports after our import statements. So I'm going to do that here. On timer fired. Oh, you know what? I think these need to have some type of data that they send. So I'm just going to say that on timer fired doesn't have any data. I'm going to use this empty tuple here. If we want, we could say, let's send a message in from JavaScript. Why don't we do that? So on JavaScript, we're going to have access to this on timer fired thing. So we got console log app.ports. Remember, it was undefined before. Let's clear this browser here and see what it is now. Still undefined. And the reason is because even though we made ports and we defined them, we didn't use them. So what we can do is we can start to use these. So when our app starts up, if everything goes okay, let's use console log to take just any string we want, like hello from Elm, and send this message to JavaScript. Now you'll see when the app restarts, console log is available. So console log is something that we have access to in this app.ports thing. And the console log value has a subscribe and an unsubscribe function that we can call from JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if app dot ports, and I'm going to use the special syntax here to allow me to kind of chain things together. But basically this is saying if I have app and if I have app.ports and if I have app.ports.console log, then I'm going to call ports console log.subscribe. We're going to also do this. And what the subscribe function is going to allow us to do is register a listener. So this is going to be the message from Elm. And all we're going to do is we are going to say console.log Elm says, and then we're going to do that message from Elm. So I'm going to save this. And then if we refresh, you'll see that we are getting a message, Elm says, from Elm here. So whatever we have Elm send our JavaScript, JavaScript's actually printing it out. And we can make this a little bit more obvious by using a window.alert, which is going to make a pop-up. This is something that you can't do very easily in Elm. Window.alert is like not a native Elm package or anything. So if we wanted to do this super retro way of sending notifications, and we save this, you can see that it's giving us this pop-up. It's giving us this Elm says, and then it looks like window.alert does not take 2 messages. So here we go. Elm says hello from Elm. So that's cool. That is handling messages from Elm to JavaScript. And I really didn't need to scream here. Why don't I just take it easy? We'll just use lowercase. So how do we handle sending messages to Elm? Well, as we saw previously, the way that we can listen for events is by using the subscriptions thing. So I'm going to do sub.batch, and right alongside our resize listener, we are going to add our on timer fired listener. So we can say on timer fired. We're going to do, got timer message from JS. So that's just the name of a message that we decided. We made that up, and we're going to have access to the string that JavaScript is going to send us. So all we're doing here is we are saying, let's listen for a message from JS. And then why don't we add that to our model? So what I'm going to do is message from JS is going to be a maybe string. So when our app starts up, when our application starts up, I'm just going to say that we don't have a message from JavaScript yet because it hasn't called us. And then I'm going to also add that here. It might save me some time in the future if I just move this case expression in a little bit more. So I'm going to do this. That way, width equals 0, height equals 0. Sorry, I'm doing a little bit of refactoring as I'm explaining these concepts, which might not be that helpful for you if you're trying to follow what I'm doing. So apologies. My bad. But I think this will be helpful for us in the short term or in the long term. All right, so let's just save that. And I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to line this up a little bit better. I'm really missing Elm format. If you can't tell, I don't normally write stuff like this. Okay. All right, so what we were doing was we were saying that we have a message from JS. We're defining that with a maybe string. In the beginning, we're going to have nothing for that. And then here, what we want to do is we want to say when we do get that message from JS, we're going to set it equal to whatever this message was. I'm just going to call this message here, so there's no ambiguity about which variable I'm referring to. This message is this message, and then message from JS is the property on our model that's a maybe. So I'm going to save this, and now this is listening for on timer fired. So what we can do is if we close this, you'll see, what does it do? It's going to keep doing this every time. Let's chill on this. Let's go back to console.log. Otherwise it's gonna keep freezing our browser every time we do this. So I'm just gonna switch that back so we can hot reload a lot more efficiently here. There we go. Elm says hello from Elm. So now if we look at what's available on our ports, app.ports, you'll see that I have access not just to the console log port that I defined, but also this on timer fired. So now we can have access to this timer fired object, and it's got a send function, which is great. So what we can do is we can set a timeout in JavaScript. And then let's make that timeout wait for 2 seconds. And then what we're going to do is we are going to say, if I always add these, because if you get rid of something on the Elm side, you don't want it to crash on your JavaScript side. So I always check to see if I have the port available still. And if I do, then I call this function. So what I'm going to do is send, and then this is the data that we want to send out to Elm. So we can say hello from JS. So before I save this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to render the message from JS. And so we'll see that in the beginning, we have nothing, right? When our app starts up, we don't have any messages from JavaScript. Then I'm going to save this, and then let's wait 2 seconds. And then boom, all of a sudden our Elm app got that message. And you can see from the Elm debugger that it came in from the got timer message from JavaScript message here. So we got this. It sent this payload, and that was data that we sent in from JavaScript. So a practical example of this is let's have our counter app from before, and let's use local storage so that every time we hit the counter, it persists, and then we can use flags to send the initial value of the counter. That's a really practical example of using flags and ports together, and I think it's a good application of the stuff that we've learned so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all this stuff. I'm going to be optimistic again about my flags. We're not going to use decoders. We're just going to focus on the important bits. This is going to be save counter. And we are going to emit an integer. We don't have any incoming ports we have to worry about, so I'm going to leave that out. And we're just going to simplify this code here. So our model is going to keep track of a count. And this is going to be the initial count. For clarity, I'm going to name this something different than the count that we have in our model. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of JSON decode value, we're going to go back to flags here. And so we're going to assume that always going to get initial count passed into us from JavaScript. There's never going to be a typo. Everything's going to always be okay. I'm going to be really optimistic about that. We're going to say when the flags come in, we are going to use the initial count that the flags passed in. And then what we're going to do is there's going to be no command here. We're going to have an increment button. Let's just leave that as is. We don't need any other messages. So I'm going to add increment. And we're going to go back to kind of what we had before, right? A long time ago, we were just doing some counter stuff. But the cool thing is when we, let's see, we don't need any subscriptions anymore. We're not listening to browser resize. But what we do want to have is a paragraph with the count. We could just do a debug toString. I'm okay with that. You know what? Let's do string.from it so that it's happy. So this is count, and then we're going to have that button with onClick that's going to send the increment message with the label plus. So does this work? So I'm going to save this. The thing is crashing, right? Because we didn't give it the flags that we needed. So always be very careful when using flags and not using JSON decoders. Initial count is going to be equal to 0. So this program should behave a lot like our counter from before. When we click, it goes up, and when we refresh, it resets. What I want to do is I want to use local storage that when I refresh, instead of always setting the value to 0, I want to get the count from local storage. So the initial count is going to be a variable that I'm going to try to load from local storage. And if I can't find it, then I'm just going to default it to 0. So I'm going to do local storage.get count. And that's going to be something that hopefully I store. Local storage get count. And then I'm going to do or 0. And I think count is going to be a string. So I'm going to do json.parse. Is that right? I don't know what I'm doing. This might crash. Local storage.get is not a function. Local storage.get item. There we go. Let's see if that works. So initially our count is 0. If we don't have a value, whatever this fallback is going to be what we end up with. So that's what we're going to send in initially. And so what we want to do is, instead of using console log, we're going to check to see if we have a save. What is it? Save count? Save counter. And then anytime we get a new count value, we are going to set that in local storage. Local storage.set item count equals the new count value. And I think we have to stringify it to work with local storage. So that's just going to kind of wrap it in quotes. And I think that'll be That'll be good. So what I want to do is we can get rid of this app timer fired thing. We're not using this anymore. We are going to call this every time we increment our counter. So right now we do +++, we refresh, it all goes away. That's because we're not actually calling save counter, which is the effect we need to do for JavaScript to be able to save it. So model.count +1 is going to be what we send out of our Elm application. And then if we do +++ and I hit refresh, you'll see my count is persisted. So the reason that's working is because I am getting a message here. I'm getting a message from Elm, and every time I run it, I'm able to access the new count, which is this new count value. And so you'll see every time I click, not only am I incrementing my local value, oops, is this right? Console log, new count. Oh, here we go. Sorry, the new count's 12, right? So as I'm doing this, you're seeing that we are getting events in JavaScript. So that's how ports work at a high level. Hopefully that was helpful. Ports going in, ports going out. Feel free to check out the Elm guide if you really want more tangible examples and stuff. But I think that's really all you need to know about ports. Be sure to always check if they're defined. We saw that there was plenty of ways that that can go wrong. And then like we saw with flags earlier, I really encourage you to use JSON decoders. I also encourage you to use JSON decoders when working with data. Not so much commands going out, but when you're working with subscriptions coming in, it's also helpful to just say, hey, I got raw JSON from JavaScript, and I'm going to try to parse that in my Elm app. Something to do as you start to build bigger and bigger apps. But that's it for me. I'm going to introduce you to my favorite way to work with JavaScript web components in the next video. See you there.